Erica Lee Fraysure was born on May 6, 1980. In 1997, 17-year-old Erica was a senior at Bracken County High School and living in Germantown, Kentucky. She was working part-time at Carrota's Pizza, which was located about 12 miles away in Augusta. After graduation, she had plans to enroll at Northern Kentucky University, where she wanted to study accounting. Sadly, she would never get the chance. On the night of October 21, 1997, Erica was hanging out with friends, cruising the streets in her car, as they often did in the nearby town of Brooksville. After visiting the Video in Tan between 9 and 10 p.m. that night, she was never seen again. The following day, her black four-door 1988 Pontiac Bonneville was discovered abandoned off Franck Lane in a field between some bales of hay. This location is about a mile from the Video in Tan. Her car was found unlocked with her purse, wallet, checkbook, and money still inside, but the keys were missing. They were later discovered across the road under some leaves, about 75 yards from the car. About 300 people during the course of the initial investigation were interviewed, including a man named Christopher Dean Menier. While Christopher had an alibi and was ruled out as a suspect, it didn't stop his name from being brought up in the case. On September 24, 1998, a Montel Williams episode aired and featured psychic Sylvia Brown along with Erica's mother, Maggie Doherty. Sylvia told her that a man had killed Erica and dumped her body in a lake not far from where Erica's car was found. When Maggie asks what the person's name is, Sylvia responds, Chris. Police, in response to that, dragged Perry Poe Lake but didn't find her body. The day after the show aired, on September 25th, Christopher murdered his 24-year-old girlfriend, Carmen Jett Moorhead, before turning the gun on himself. His mother, Linda Marie Menier, then filed a lawsuit against the Montel Williams show, alleging they showed her son in an unfavorable light. A detective on Erica's case said that Christopher was only questioned by police because his age at the time fit someone who might have known Erica. In the end, a U.S. district judge ruled that Linda nor her deceased son were entitled to any damages because their privacy was not violated. Another suspect is Shane Simcox, who was around 20 years old when Erica went missing and was with her on the night she vanished. He claimed she gave him a ride to his house and was dropped off at 9 p.m. Shane was no stranger to trouble and was previously expelled from Bracken County High School after threatening to kill a teacher and her daughter. In 1994, he was convicted of a burglary charge and served 4 months in prison. When investigators asked him to take a lie detector test about Erica's disappearance, he refused. In an interview in 2017, Shane still admits he might have been the last person to see her alive, but denies having anything to do with her disappearance. He also admitted that he did some dumb things when he was younger. Here's a clip of that interview.
We found 21-year-old Shane Simcox at a Bracken County hog farm where he sometimes works. He admits he was the last person who saw Erica Fraysure alive, admits he's been told he's a prime suspect, but he denies he had anything to do with her disappearance.
I didn't. She picked me up and we rode around town for a little bit.
Simcox says they got tired of that, and then Erica decided to go home.
So she dropped me off at my house around 9 o'clock, and that was the last time I seen her.
Did you kill Erica Fraysure?
No, I didn't.
But Simcox refuses to take a lie detector test. He admits that's fueled suspicions, but he blames his own stubbornness and the man overseeing the case, Kentucky State Police Detective Bob Scott.
They're just making a big deal because I won't take a lie detector test. Because Bob Scott he acted kind of like a towards me, basically. I don't mean to say it on TV, I kind of slipped, but, you know, I don't have to put up with his crap.
Can you say anything to folks out there that might set their mind at ease?
I don't know really what I would say.
Simcox admits he's a suspect for other reasons, too.
When I was younger, you know, stupid kid stuff.
And then there was the threat made to one of his Bracken County high school teachers.
I just told her that I was going to kill her, basically.
In 2011, Erica's mother, Maggie, died without ever knowing what happened to her daughter. In 2020, investigators received a tip about searching the stairwell of a local school. However, the search came up empty. This isn't the first time investigators have received a similar tip, but they've been unable to locate the stairwell where she is allegedly buried. Unfortunately, as of 2024, Erica has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Morgan Jade Violi was born to parents Stacy and Glenn Violi on November 3, 1988, in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and was the youngest of 3 daughters. In 1996, 7-year-old Morgan lived in the Colony Apartments in Bowling Green and was a student at Warren Elementary School. Her family described her as a very flamboyant and spirited child who was always smiling and loved to dance. On July 24, 1996, Morgan was playing outside with her 6-year-old friend, Destiny Miller, while her sisters, aged 10 and 11, were close by. At about 12:30 p.m., the girls were walking across the parking lot when a man in a van drove up to them. The man got out and grabbed Destiny, but thankfully, she was able to break loose from him and started to run, then stopped when she realized he had turned his attention to Morgan. Once he had Morgan, he threw her into the passenger seat of the van, climbed over her into the driver's seat, and then raced out of the parking lot. Morgan's sister, Heather, heard a scream and looked to see Destiny running through the apartment buildings, but thought they were just playing. Multiple people at the apartment had witnessed Morgan's abduction and called the police. They described the man as a white male in his 20s, slender, with collar-length sandy brown hair along with a beard. The van was a maroon-colored 1978 Chevy that was believed to have been stolen out of Dayton, Ohio, the day before the abduction. On July 26, 1996, investigators found the vehicle over 80 miles away in the Union 76 truck stop in Franklin, Tennessee. There was also forensic evidence inside that helped prove it was the van involved in the abduction. Morgan's father, Glenn, became an immediate suspect because he had just lost a custody battle during the divorce from Morgan's mother, Stacy. However, he was able to prove he was at work at the time of the abduction. Even with that, Glenn said the FBI continued to investigate him and even believed he might have hired somebody to take her. He also admitted to failing 5 lie detector tests, but remained adamant that he had nothing to do with his daughter's disappearance. It would be 2 whole years before Glenn was eventually cleared. However, by that time, his reputation had been ruined, along with his business, and it forced him to move away from Bowling Green. 3 months later, on October 20th, 1996, a woman in White House, Tennessee, found Morgan's unclothed skeletal remains in a culvert outside of an old barn on North Swift Road. Unfortunately, due to the condition of her remains, her cause of death could not be determined. Witnesses had seen an older model white Ford van parked outside the barn for nearly 4 hours the day after Morgan went missing. There were even reports that a maroon van matching the description of the vehicle used in the abduction was also seen near the barn. A month later, in November of 1996, Tony Scott Redmond from Louisville was questioned in Morgan's case. He closely resembled an early composite image of the suspect, but denied involvement. Redmond showed up on their radar after being arrested for kidnapping and attempted sexual assault. However, his attorney said he could have never found his way to Bowling Green even if he tried. In the end, the FBI ruled him out. The composite sketch of the suspect has been updated a few times over the years, and I agree it does resemble Tony. He has since passed away in 2018. It's now been over 27 years since Morgan was abducted and murdered, and as of 2024, this case remains unsolved. Peggy Sue Ashley-Vinson was born on March 17, 1977. In 2000, 23-year-old Peggy was the mother of 3 small children living in Scottsville, Kentucky. Peggy had custody of her 8-month-old daughter, while the 2 oldest children lived with their fathers. On the evening of July 28, 2000, Peggy left work at Federal Mogul, an auto parts manufacturer, and met up with her boyfriend. At some point during the night, the 2 got into an argument, which ended in her allegedly being assaulted with a deadly weapon. Upset, she drove to the sheriff's department and reported the assault. She then left the department around 1:30 a.m., drove to the A.O. Smith Electrical Motor Plant, and was caught on the parking lot camera at 2:07 a.m. A white truck had followed her in and parked next to her. She then gets out of her car and climbs into the truck, and they drive off, and she is never heard from again. The man in the truck was later identified as Calvin Smith. He claims he took her to a payphone to make a call and then drove her back to her parked car. It was later determined that no calls were made from the payphone he allegedly took her to, and the security camera shows they never returned. 2 days after she went missing, the babysitter of her infant daughter called the Kentucky Department of Social Services to report her missing and to surrender the child. When investigators began looking into her disappearance, they first suspected the boyfriend, but he had a solid alibi and was ruled out. His name has never been released. For some reason, even with Calvin Smith being identified as the last person to see her alive, the case would remain unsolved and years would go by without any updates. In 2019, 19 years after her disappearance, Calvin was named a person of interest in Peggy's disappearance, and police got a warrant to search a barn on his property in Munfordville, Kentucky. Unfortunately, nothing of significance was discovered, and as of 2024, Peggy has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Sharon Rose Apgar was born on April 26, 1966, to Patty Noss and went by Sherry. Sherry was described as a fun-loving person with a heart of gold. In November of 1982, she married Darrell Dunn when she was just 16 years old and gave birth to their only child, Joshua, in May of 1983. However, the marriage didn't last and they divorced in 1985. A few years later, she met and married Mike George, who had a criminal record and was a member of a Cincinnati-based motorcycle gang. Unfortunately, Mike completely took control of Sherry's life and got her addicted to prescription drugs. He was also physically abusive, leaving her with bruises and broken bones at times. In the early 1990s, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison, and Sherry finally saw a chance to break free from him. She managed to get off of drugs and began getting her life together. Unfortunately, once Mike got out of prison, he told her he was a changed man and convinced her to rekindle the relationship. The couple then moved to Florida in order to make a fresh start, and for a brief moment, it looked like things were working out. That is until they moved back to Ohio, and Mike began reassociating with the motorcycle gang. Sherry's life was once again spiraling out of control, and she was back to using prescription drugs. In 1999, Mike was again sent to prison, and so Sherry asked her family for help to get away from him. She once again stopped using drugs and moved into her mother Patty's home. She then filed for divorce, but remained in constant fear for her life. That November, Mike got out of prison, which only intensified her fear that he or the motorcycle gang would murder her. She even told her mother to call the police if she suddenly went out of contact for more than a day or two. Sadly, Sherry's fears were spot on. On November 18, 1999, Sherry left Patty's home to go out with some friends. Sadly, her mother would never see her daughter again. After leaving, she was seen at the Cross Country Inn in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. This hotel is now a Super 8. After leaving the hotel, she allegedly met up with Mike, and that was the last contact anyone had with her. When Sherry failed to show up the next day, Patty reported her missing. When investigators tried to locate Mike, he was also missing. In January 2000, investigators ran a small article in a local newspaper asking the public for help in tracking down both Sherry and Mike. As the months went by with no answers, Patty said she believed her daughter was now dead and that Mike was responsible and went into hiding. This next bit of information was posted by 2 different users on websleuths.com, and while I can't verify the validity of it, I still think it is worth mentioning. According to one user, they had allegedly spoken with Sherry's son Josh, who said that Mike was alive and he had run into him a few years ago. This post was made on December 22, 2020. Another user said that Mike's brother Joe, who is now deceased, and his wife Terry Viox claimed that on the night she met up with Mike, they shot her up with drugs and she overdosed. They then dumped her body at Mike's other brother Wayne's house in Kentucky. This post was made on November 5, 2021. From my research, I discovered that Wayne lives in Columbia, Kentucky, which is over 3 hours from the motel where Sherry was last seen in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. I also found that Mike still lives in Ohio and possibly moved around a bit after Sherry disappeared. His brother Joe died in 2000 and Terry remarried, hence the last name Viox. Considering all the details I found, I believe there might be some truth to the information posted. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a photo of Mike. I would say that investigators know where Mike is and that he has a lawyer and has refused to talk. Investigators even told Fox 19 in Cincinnati, Ohio, that some of the people involved in the case have refused to speak with detectives. Sadly, in 2004, Patty passed away without ever knowing what happened to her daughter. As of 2024, Sherry has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Carrie Lee Burgett was born to David and Debbie and graduated from Morgan County High School in 2006. In 2017, Carrie, now in her late 20s, was a stay-at-home mother of 2, living with her parents in West Liberty, Kentucky. As a side note, there were conflicting reports about her age. Some websites reported she was 28, while others reported she was 29 years old. On March 28, 2017, shortly after midnight, Carrie and her boyfriend left in a blue Chevrolet S10, telling her mother she'd be back in time to get the children ready for school. Sadly, that was the last time her mother ever saw her again. After leaving, they joined up with her boyfriend's sister and her husband and went to the home of Angela and Jesse Keaton in West Liberty. By April 6th, when there was still no sign of Carrie, her family reported her missing. Her boyfriend and sister claimed that Carrie left in the middle of the night with someone they didn't know, and they had no clue where she went. Strangely though, her boyfriend never called Carrie's family to make sure she made it home safely. Also, after she went missing, the boyfriend allegedly sold all her jewelry, but her family has never been able to locate it. Sadly, as of 2024, Carrie has never been found, and this case remains unsolved.